This lecture video is going to show you how to go from moles to grams and then grams to moles. So if you are given the number of moles of a substance, how can you figure out how many grams that would be or how much it would weigh in grams, and vice versa. If you're given a certain amount of grams of a substance, how can you figure out the number of moles? We're going to look at single elements to start with, and then we'll throw in some compounds to end. So the question is, what is the mass in grams if I have 5.2 moles of carbon? So in order to go from moles to grams, we need to know how many grams are in 1 mole. And we know this from looking at the element symbol on the periodic table, right? We've worked with carbon before. We know that 1 mole of carbon has 12.01 grams, or it weighs 12.01 grams, okay? So you always know that 1 mole of an element is going to equal its atomic mass, okay? So this was found on the periodic table, right? So 1 mole of hydrogen has 1.01 grams. 1 mole of, let's say, nitrogen is going to equal 14 grams, okay? So now that we have this information, we can figure out this problem. So again, start with what you have. We have 5.2 moles of carbon. Put it in your fraction. We need to have moles down here in order to cancel that out, right? And we know from up here that 1 mole of carbon equals 12.01 grams. So we can cancel the moles out. Now let's just double check. The only unit left is grams, and that's the unit that the question asked for. So what you would do is you would take 5.2 times 12.0, all of it over 1, and you would end up with 62.45 grams. Okay? So in 5.2 moles of carbon will weigh 62.45 grams. So let's try another one on your own. What is the mass in grams of 3.8 moles of nitrogen? Pause the video, try and work through this on your own, and then restart it to see the answer. So again, we know that 1 mole of nitrogen is going to weigh 14.0 grams, right? We got that from the periodic table. So if we plug in our numbers now, 3.8 moles, which is what you were given, put it in our fraction. We have to have moles down here. I should say moles of nitrogen. We know that 1 mole of nitrogen weighs 14.0 grams. We can cancel those units out. We have grams left. Grams is what they asked for, so then you would multiply across in order to get your answer, which will be 3.8 times 14. Oops. 53.2 grams. All right, so let's flip this around. Let's see if we can figure out how many moles of something is in a certain amount of a substance. And we'll stick with using carbon and nitrogen again as well. So let's say we want to find out how many moles of carbon are in 63.1 grams. So again, we know that 1 mole of carbon is going to equal 12.01 grams. Okay, we got that from the periodic table. So start with what we have. We have 63.1 grams. Put it in your fraction. We know that in order to cancel the grams, we have to have grams down below. Okay, so put grams of carbon, And we know from up here that there is 12.01 grams of carbon in 1 mole of carbon. Right? So these cancel, and the unit we have left is moles of carbon, which is what the question is looking for. So we know we can stop here. So we would take 63.1 divided by 12.0, which equals 5.25, and we know it's moles of carbon. Okay? So again, if you put your information into these conversion factors, into this dimensional analysis, you can kind of check your work because you're crossing things off as you go, and whatever unit you're left with, as long as it's the unit that it's asking for, you know that you're on the right track. So you just really want to make sure that this unit is matching this unit. That's why I always start with this and I put the units down here right away so that you don't get confused. So let's try another one. Let's go with how many moles of, let's say, nitrogen are in 6.31 grams. All right, so again, pause the video, try and figure this out on your own. But we know that 1 mole of nitrogen equals 14.0 grams. So if we're starting with 63.1 grams, put it in your fraction. We know grams of nitrogen. So we're going to put grams of nitrogen down below so that they cross off. We know that there are 14 grams in 1 mole of nitrogen. So the grams would cross off. And so then we would take 63.1 and we would divide it by 14. And that would end up giving us 4.51 moles of nitrogen. Okay, moles is what we ended up with. Moles is what they were asking for. At this point, you can work on the first 2 problems on the assignment. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at what happens when you add a compound to it. So we've only focused on single elements, so just nitrogen or just carbon. But what happens if you have a molecule that's got more than 1 element in it? Okay, so how many grams are in 3.0 moles of carbon dioxide? Okay, so instead of now just 1 single element, we have a compound. We have 1 carbon dioxide is 1 carbon and 2 oxygens. So the first thing we need to do is we need to figure out the molar mass of carbon dioxide. And that's easy. You're going to find the mass of all the carbons. You're going to find the mass of all the oxygens. So we know carbon has a mass of 12.01 and carbon dioxide has 1 carbon in it. So there's 12.01 grams of carbon in that. Now, oxygen is 16.0 times, but there's 2 of them, okay? So that's going to give us 38.0 grams. And so if you add them together, you're going to end up with 50.01 grams. So 50.01 grams is how much weight 1 mole of carbon dioxide is, right? Because a mole of anything is going to equal its molecular weight, its molecular mass. So now that you have this information, you can plug it into this problem just like before. We started with 3.0 moles of carbon dioxide, okay? We know that moles of carbon dioxide has to be down below in order to cancel, and we know that 1 mole of carbon dioxide equals 50.01 grams. So those would cancel, and what we would end up with is 150.0 grams. So 3 moles of carbon dioxide equals 150.0 grams. So when you have a compound, you do the same process as a single element, but you have to make sure you're counting the total mass of that, which includes counting how many of each element there is and what its atomic mass would be. Right? So let's try one more that you can do on your own. So how many grams in 2.0 moles of in water, H2O, okay? So first we need to figure out the molar mass of H2O. So hydrogen is 1.01, and there's 2 of them, okay? So it'd be 2.02. Oxygen is 16, but there's 1 of them, only 1 oxygen, so we would get 16. So add them together, you'd end up with 18.2 grams in 1 mole, okay, of water. So now plug in your information. Well, we have 2.0 moles of water. So we know that moles of water has to be down below. And we know that 1 mole of water is going to equal 18.02 grams. This will cancel because they're the same. That leaves us with grams. The question asked us for grams, so we know we don't have to do any more fractions. And so then if you just do the math, 18.02 times 2 will end up giving you 36.4 grams in 2 moles of water. So 2 moles of water would weigh 36.04 grams. So now you can try and do the next question on your sheet. Question number 3.